If God communicates through beauty, then technology is how we respond. This is a new slogan that we put on our website. And I want to talk about this. It was inspired by a workshop at Ralston College, a college in Savannah I wasn't really familiar with, but through my, YouTube algorithm and the kind of stuff that I listen to, particularly on the sort of academic philosophy side, this was served to me. Now, Ralston College, I don't know the details, and I don't want to speak for them, but it seems to me it's a liberal arts college with, let's say, conservative Western value point of view. So they teach the classics, so they go back to Greek and Roman and Latin and things along those lines. And this workshop was about the Renaissance, a contemporary Renaissance, not the Renaissance of Florence in the 15th century, but the actual today's current Renaissance. Now, the way I interpret the workshop is the goal of the organizers was to bring scholars and practitioners, which means people in the arts, like architects. They have an architect, they have a composer, they have a visual artist, and a writer. They spoke at this event. And the idea was to find a connection between the Renaissance of the 15th century and today. And to me, that's an interesting start for a long conversation about where are we today? What does it mean? What did the Renaissance mean back then? What could it mean today? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Things along those lines. So I thought it was really interesting. And I think the conclusion, in my opinion, is that we're at a time when for decades we've been neglecting the truth. And that has manifested itself in several embodiments. For example, art has become, I would call, disenfranchised from beauty. Modern art, the detergent in the art museum, Andy Warhol, things like that, which maybe have a merit. Certainly they do. They go for a lot of money. But from a societal perspective, you have to question because you can ask the question, is there objective truth? And this goes back to a book that we have in our principle stack, which is The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch, where there's a whole chapter about objective truth. And I think it's something like Why Are Flowers Beautiful? Something like that. Or maybe that's Sean Carroll's book. I might be confusing it. But nevertheless, the idea is there such a thing as objective beauty? And my answer to that is yes. The same way there is objective truth. There is such a thing as truth. And we might not be able to get it. That's a whole different conversation. Do we humans have the ability, the sensory technology to get to that objective truth? That is a whole different conversation. But again, we have to start with the premise of objective truth because that is real. And we know it's real because we can do experiments. And I want to use beauty as the experimental setup. I think you would argue, most people wouldn't argue with the fact that if we show them certain pieces of art, whether it's music or visual arts or literature, paintings, architecture, a lot of people would agree with the concept of beauty. They say that is beautiful. And one of the beautiful things in the Ralston workshop was a presentation by a gentleman, a philologist, a person that studies language, that there are trends, right? There is certainly that tastes and trends in culture, but there are also things that last over millennia. For example, Latin and Greek language is a dead language, but it's still being used as a technology to develop, to transmit knowledge over millennia. So there are things, beauty, for example, a Greek column is a certain manifestation of beauty. The Michelangelo statue is a manifestation of beauty that transcends times and cultures, and therefore has a certain closeness to objective truth. The reason we're inspired by this, and I want to tie this back to the podcast series, not even a podcast series. The purpose of this podcast series is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So you might think, what does a Ralston liberal arts antique or classics seminar about truth has to do with hedge funds? Well, it's much more related than you might think, because we are in the truth-seeking business here. We're in the knowledge business. That I think most people would agree with. I think less people would agree with the truth-seeking business because there is a lot of different ways to approach the hedge fund business. But we here at Orange Capital Partners, we're in the truth-seeking business. So this is very important for our business. It's not our podcast. It's April 27, 2025. This is Scrim Telco. For today, the fund is down 3%. The market is down 1%. For the year, we are down 34%. The market is down 7%. We're outperforming by 27%. So the Ralston College seminar about the Renaissance resonates with us because we see ourselves in the truth-seeking business. And whilst the Ralston seminar was more about culture, about politics, about arts, about science, all these things tie into our business too. We are as much related to science and arts as these people because we see ourselves as the translators of science to technology to entrepreneurship. That's where we see our mission. The mission of Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. So they come from academia, and they are important academic achievements that can find their way into technology and products. So by definition, there has to be a relationship between the projects that we pursue and truth, because we can't defy gravity, we can't defy truth, we can't defy beauty, we can't defy this natural tendency of any sentient species to converge towards the truth. It applies as much to Darwinian evolution as it applies to the hedge fund business. So this is very important. So let me talk a little bit about the seminar, and then I'll tie it to the hedge fund business. So first, what did they discuss in the seminar? The link's in the show notes, by the way. So there were presentations by academics, by professors, let's say philology, professor of antique, professor of Greek, and things like that. And then there were also presentations by artists. The purpose of both of these presentations was or both of these series of presentations was to tie objective truth to current events. I think that, in my opinion, was the main objective. So what does that mean? It means that we had for decades, and now I'm paraphrasing some of the presentations, and some of it is my opinion. We had for decades now a movement away from objective truth, which has started in the post-World War II area with modern art. It manifests itself in, for example, in the paintings of Andy Warhol and Lichtenstein and people like that. Music, John Cage, Philip Glass. There's still a relationship to beauty. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Philip Glass and John Cage. Nevertheless, it's starting to divert a little bit from the actual concept of beauty that we would all agree with is what we understand on the beauty. Now, same in architecture. Bauhaus architecture moves into modern art. I'm a big fan of About Buildings and Cities, the podcast that is discussing architecture. And it's very prevalent there that you can see the tension between beauty as sort of an objective, natural phenomenon, and then beauty is sort of a constructed thing. And again, like we have people like Frank Gehry, in my opinion, still proponents of beauty, but already they're starting to distort the general view of what we consider beauty. So there's always a tension, and This is not meant to be an art critic episode, nor is the Ralston College seminar an art critic seminar. It is a philosophical conversation about, is there objective truth? And the answer is there is objective truth. And if we move away from it, like we did in the post-World War II period, we can end up in a bad situation, in a situation where we have relativistic dictatorship. What does that mean? That means there is a certain perspective of humans, of people, that there is no such thing as truth. There is no such thing as beauty, that it's relative. And relativism is, in my opinion, a dagger into the heart of humanity, because relativism leads to totalitarian regimes. That's the message of the Ralston College seminar. That is something that we abide to. That is something that we witnessed particularly in the COVID area, in the post-COVID Biden administration area, where we had wokeism grow to a prominence that really became scary. I will never forget, there was a Stanford conference about academic freedom in 2022, which was sabotaged by the Stanford faculty, by the Stanford administration, and by the students. Nevertheless, they went with it. Kudos to John Cochrane and the organizers. Kudos to the people who attended. Because think about it. This is one of our leading institutions, one of our leading academic institutions, which is organizing a workshop or a seminar or a conference, or all of the above, about academic freedom, and it's being sabotaged because academic freedom is orthogonal to wokeism, and wokeism is totalitarian control of speech and thought. And that happens when you step down the rabbit hole of relativism. So the Ralston College workshop is an antidote to relativism. There is no such thing as relative truth or relative beauty. There is such a thing as good and bad art. There is such a thing as a good deed and a bad deed. There is such a thing as a good law and a bad law. And we humans, we can't probably know the exact provenance of good and bad. But what we can do, and this is very Popperian, and we're very big proponents of Popper here at Orange Capital Partners, what we can do is try to approximate that. We can't improve. And we need truth for error correction. That's the key. Without error correction, we will always end up in a bad place. So we need truth. We need truth to be able to correct ourselves and our actions against the benchmark that is truth. Even though we might not know what it exactly is, we always know through our experiments whether we're getting closer or further away. That's the fundamental message that the Ralston College seminar is sending. And that is the fundamental message that we also, the Orange Capital Partners, are abiding to. And here is now the tie to our business. If you're in a hedge fund business, you have to think about the following. You have all these types of possibilities. Like this is a very broad sort of set of options that you have in order to do what you can do. You raise money and you invest the money in projects that hopefully will generate wealth. Now, you can have different approaches, and there's lots of different approaches. There are the people who trade on a daily basis. There are algo traders that try to exploit, call it inefficiencies in millisecond type trading. And then there's people like us that we believe that there is a certain amount of truth behind science and technology that is, and hence our slogan, if God communicates through beauty, then technology is the way we respond, which is it's tied to a certain universal truth. There is something universal about technology that you can't predict its proliferation in society. So it's a bit like the idea of the multiverse, where good knowledge proliferates throughout the multiverse, knowledge that is hard to validate, knowledge that is hard to, what's the word? to undo. Like you can't just for example, knowledge such as if you explain the seasons by just saying the angels are angry, that's why we have winter. Well, that's not really useful knowledge because it can be easily undone with like, okay, it's not because they're angry, but because they cry or something like that, right? But knowledge about the planets and the astrophysics that lead to seasons and things like that, that is much harder to undo. That is much harder to neglect, and therefore it's knowledge that proliferates throughout the multiverse. So the same way we think about knowledge, we think about technologies. Certain technologies, we have jargon for it. For example, they scale at lower cost and higher value. For example, self-driving cars, the way Tesla is approaching self-driving cars is a technology that we believe will scale at higher value and lower cost and therefore will proliferate. So these are things we can predict with high probability. It doesn't mean that it's very easy to make money with those things because you still have to predict, for example, whether the winners will actually be the winners and things like that. But nevertheless, you still have to understand first and foremost what is it actually, what is the technology that might be proliferating and what isn't. And that is very close to the concept of truth. That's why we believe this is so important. And I think it also, by the way, applies to the concept of beauty. The same way that we believe that there is actually such a thing as objective beauty, there is also such a thing as an objective good product and service. Something that over time, even if you take all the opposition you can get, take Tesla. There's political oppositions to Tesla and things like that. But in the end, let's say the new Model Y, the Juniper Model Y is just the best car in the world because it has the best design, the best technology, the best value, and therefore it will win. So there's such a thing as an objective, true, good product. And that's what we believe in here at Orange Capital Partners. Now, the word believe is a load of work, by the way, because it's not just that we believe in, it is true. That is true. And therefore, we have a concept or a framework developed that helps us navigate through the maze of opportunities in the hedge fund business. And that's why we believe that this Ralston College seminar is very important also for the hedge fund business. It's a very nice example of how you can take supposedly unrelated concepts, such as liberal arts, antiquity, ancient Greek philosophy, and tie it to a workshop about the renaissance of culture today, and also tie it to the hedge fund business. These things are related, and I think it's a beautiful example of how different fields, different approaches towards the same fundamental question, which is there an objective truth, can yield very fruitful results in different fields. Thank you.